What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be continuing on with this new little series covering 3 things that each Battlefield game did either well or did poorly. And today we're going to be taking a look at 3 things that I think Battlefield 5 did poorly. If you haven't already, then be sure to go and check out the first video on Battlefield 5, which obviously covered 3 things that I think did really well. But with that being said, let's get stuck right into it. Now, one of the more controversial and disliked things about Battlefield 5, which is the first thing on this list, is the changes that were made to the health and the health regen compared to pretty much every Battlefield game in the past. In the older games, health regen was just a passive ability where after a certain amount of time not taking damage, you would eventually start to get your health back, similar to pretty much every shooter ever made. Now, the regen was very slow and it also took maybe 15 or more seconds to actually start regenerating, but it did still start regenerating, and so that is something that was not the case in Battlefield 5. Instead, they replaced it with a system where you essentially have a single med pack that heals you for I think 50 or 60 points of health, and once you've used that single med pack, then you are essentially screwed in terms of health regen unless you can get healed by a medic on your team, or you can find a health crate somewhere around the map. But if you are in a populated area and you do get low on health, then more often than not you are pretty much screwed once you have used your med pack, provided you're not a medic, at which point you obviously have unlimited med packs. Now, the main reason I dislike this whole system is because the team becomes too reliant on medics to the point where I swear about 60% of the team are playing as medics simply so that they can heal themselves and not have to rely on anyone else. For anyone who's played Battlefront 2, it ended up being the same kind of situation as the officer situation over there. Everyone just played officer because you pretty much had to if you wanted battle points, and so then you get half the lobby playing as the same class, with almost none of them playing the way that the class was actually intended to be played. This makes it even harder if you aren't actually playing as a medic, because you have 20 teammates who are playing medic, yet most of them are actually just playing that class so that they can heal themselves, and therefore they aren't actually playing for the team in the same way that a regular medic main would. So you essentially have a whole ass team of medics, none of which are going to be reviving you or healing you, and that makes it all that much more frustrating. I do somehow tend to get revived quite a bit in Battlefield 5 compared to pretty much any other Battlefield game. In the past it was only medics who could revive, whereas now it is medics and squad mates. So I think the revival side of the game is fine, but in terms of healing, it really is just a pretty poorly designed mechanic that had the intention of making the game more team-based through medics, but ended up doing the complete opposite by causing more players to play that class, just not in the way that the class was intended. I do hope that in Battlefield 6 they continue to focus on making the game very squad based and making sure each class plays a vital role, but in saying that, I do hope the health regen system goes back to the way it was in the past, as in my opinion it was one of the worst additions to Battlefield in recent history. Now, the next thing that I think Battlefield 5 did very poorly was in regards to the map design, as there are far too many maps in this game that I think most people just honestly hate to play and simply will not play when it comes up in their rotation. In past Battlefield titles, pretty much every map was seen as a really good map. There's always the occasional 1 or 2 maps that everyone hates, and then there's also just a matter of personal preference to where some people like certain maps and others don't. But in Battlefield 3, 4 and 1, I'd say the maps were at like a 90% hit rate to where you would gladly play on pretty much any map in the game and have a lot of fun doing so. Well, in Battlefield 5, I honestly think that is quite the opposite, as there are barely any maps in the game that I think are all-time great Battlefield maps. So many of them have such weird flows to them, and do not get me started on how open so many of these maps are, making it super hard to counter the tank spammers who sit in a paddock 1 kilometer away from you, sniping you with anti-tank rounds. Both Armada and Panzerstorm may quite honestly be the worst multiplayer maps that I've ever encountered in any game that I've ever played. You may as well make a map on the salt flats and just have absolutely flat ground with no cover or anything, because that's exactly how some of the maps in this game felt to me. Now, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy maps having open sections to it. There are plenty of all-time classic Battlefield maps that have really large areas that are open, but they always seem to be placed in suitable areas of the map, unlike Battlefield 5, where often the main area of the map would just be completely open, and not only that, but it takes about 45 years to get there if you don't have a vehicle. Now, I will say that a lot of the Pacific maps that they added around 1 year after launch were actually pretty awesome, so I'm not so much talking about those ones here. Pacific Storm, Solomon Islands, and of course Wake Island were really fun maps to play for the most part, and so really my only issue here is with the vanilla maps for the game, as honestly outside of Rotterdam, Aris, and maybe Aerodrome at times, I really do not like a single vanilla map from the game, which is not the best way to start off an experience in the first few months of launch. I do hope that in Battlefield 6 they try and design the maps to sort of make the ebb and flow of a game just a little bit better than it is in Battlefield 5. It is something that they've essentially nailed in previous titles, and so I am confident that they can get the maps back to where they used to be. Now, the final thing in this video that I think Battlefield 5 did poorly was all about the animations in the game. I won't lie, the game felt like a step backwards compared to some of the previous games in terms of how clunky it can feel at times. Mantling a wall or getting in and out of vehicles, for example, it all just felt so clunky, and it's probably one of the areas that makes me the most frustrated at the game. Essentially just dying because I'm stuck in some stupid animation that takes about 8 seconds to finish. I know that they want to go for a more realistic approach at times when it comes to Battlefield, and so having the mantling be a bit slower or making your jump not as high or as smooth as in other games does make sense in that regard, but I don't think anyone wants Battlefield to become a military simulator, so there are boundaries to what you can make realistic before they just become a burden on the game. One thing that they did nail was the movement animations such as sprinting and the slide animations. I will give them credit there that those animations are spot on and probably made the game feel smoother than ever before when it comes to moving around the map, but outside of that I think everything else just feels way too clunky, and as I said, it just makes the game so much less enjoyable for me when half of my deaths are from some bullshit that I can't really control. I am hopeful and confident that with so much work being put into Battlefield 6 as well as being on next gen consoles, that a lot of those clunky animations will be gone and replaced with a much smoother experience, so I really do hope they make that a focal point of their work on the game. Let me know down in the comments what you guys thought Battlefield 5 did poorly, or even let me know if you disagree with some of the stuff on my list. At the end of the day, it is all completely subjective, so I'm keen to hear your thoughts on Battlefield 5 as well as your thoughts and hopes leading into Battlefield 6. That is going to do it for this one though, guys. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.